Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. I never imagined I'd find myself in the situation I'm in right now. Growing up, I had all the typical dreams of a healthy young man. As a kid, I wanted to be the best football player in the world. In my teens, I dreamed of being a famous rock star admired by young women and idolized by other guys. I'd practice with a tennis racket, pretending it was a guitar. Two things stopped me from reaching those dreams. I was terrible at sports, and I couldn't carry a tune to save my life. But those facts didn't change the talents I kept hidden in my imagination. In my mind, I'd see myself scoring the winning touchdown or playing the final bars of a killer guitar solo in my hit cover of Led Zeppelin's The Immigrant Song. Missing out on those dreams didn't hold me back. As I moved into my 20s, I stayed optimistic and eager about life. I know it might be hard to believe seeing me now like this, but I'm not complaining. I wouldn't trade this moment for any dream or experience I've ever had, even though it's come with a heavy cost for me and my family. I just need to share a secret I've kept for years with those who trust me and understand me. That's you. Relax and listen while I tell you how I ended up here. This is the only time I'll ever share this with anyone. First, let me tell you a little about myself to help you understand who I am. I was named Henry Michael Grant, born in November 1973, the only child of my mother Mary and my late father George. From early on, I felt different from other kids, though I didn't know why. My parents often found me talking to people no one else could see. I described vivid dreams and sometimes said I had floated above my body, watching myself from the ceiling. I even told them I had passed through walls and seen them sleeping. Naturally, they were uncomfortable and told me not to share these things with anyone. They said others wouldn't understand, and honestly, I don't think they did either. As I grew, I realized I had psychic abilities and learned, mostly by trial and error, to control them. Most notably, I could see and speak to spirits of the departed. These encounters felt so real that it took time to understand they were ghosts visiting me. They never frightened me. I also seemed to have moments of second sight, sometimes predicting or guessing outcomes accurately, but I never pursued it, unsure if it was coincidence. That part scared me. What I never doubted was my ability to project my astral self outside my body. Each time, I felt an incredible sense of freedom, like flying. It became an important part of my life. These experiences went on through my teenage years, into high school, through meeting and courting my future wife, and even through the heartbreak of losing my father. He passed away from a rare leukemia, deteriorating quickly. His death shocked us and left a deep impression on how fragile life is. But I found comfort when his spirit visited me 2 days later, reassuring me he was at peace and that someday we would be reunited as God intended. That memory became a cornerstone of my faith during hard times ahead. Beyond communicating with spirits, my gifts gave me some incredible experiences. One was entering another person's body. I did this a few times but stopped because it felt invasive, like spying or trespassing. The hosts always sensed me quickly, and I never stayed long enough to be discovered. I never tried this with a woman, though. That changed with my wife, a night I'll never forget, for better and worse. We married young, deeply in love and devoted to each other, so why wait? Our intimacy was always intense and passionate. One night, I found myself wishing I could understand how she felt when we were together, what it's like to be a woman in love. Just as Sarah neared her peak, I completely lost control, wishing I could share in her pleasure. Without intending to, I joined with her in that moment and felt some of the most intense sensations I'd ever known. She had no idea I was there and mistook it for her own emotions, only realizing something was off when she came down from her peak and noticed my body was heavy and lifeless on top of her. She was terrified and screamed. I think she thought I had died. Her scream snapped me back to reality, and I returned to my body. At that point, I had to explain everything about my abilities. It scared her badly, And she warned me she'd leave if I ever tried anything like that again. That was the lowest point in our relationship. I vowed never to risk our marriage like that again. I would never stop enjoying my out-of-body experiences, they were as much a part of me as breathing, but I promised myself I'd never try to merge with another person's body like that again. I stuck to that promise until the accident I'm about to tell you about. It began one night when I was driving my son Noah, 10, and daughter Elizabeth, 12, home after a short holiday at my brother-in-law's place. It had been a brief stay to give me and Sarah some alone time. Don't get me wrong, we love our kids deeply and wouldn't want them out of our lives for long. But after more than 12 years without real quality time together, Sarah and I wanted to reconnect, to feel young and in love again rather than the tired 35-year-olds we'd become. At first, it felt strange being alone, but we quickly found our rhythm. We went out to eat, kissed passionately, and did whatever we wanted for 4 days. But by then, we missed the kids. It was time for them to come back and shake up our world again. I left our Manhattan Beach home to pick them up from Sarah's brother Jake's house, near Victorville, just past the San Bernardino Mountains. Sarah stayed home to catch up on housework she'd been neglecting while we enjoyed our freedom. The trip took about an hour and a half. The roads were unusually quiet for a Saturday afternoon. After thanking Jake, I got back on Interstate 15 and drove for about 15 minutes when Elizabeth suddenly said, "Daddy, I need to use the bathroom." Typical. I had told her to go before leaving, but she didn't want to. I saw the next exit and decided to pull off to find a gas station. Maybe I could grab them something to drink too. We stopped at a gas station where Elizabeth took care of business. As we headed back toward the highway, dusk was falling, and the fading light made everything look different. Somehow, I took a wrong turn. Although I could see the highway lights in the distance, we were on a quiet road running parallel to it. That's when everything changed. As I turned a sharp corner, the front left tire blew out. I fought to keep control, but the car slipped, veered across the road, and plunged about 10 feet down a small embankment beside the road amid the children's screams and shouts. Everything fell silent for a moment, and my only thought was for my children. I felt relief hearing Noah ask Emily, "Are you okay, Liz?" and even more when she replied, "Why yeah, I think so," though her crying and calling for Dad made my heart race. At least they were alive and seemed okay. Noah shouted that he was trapped under something. I tried to respond but found I couldn't move or speak. My voice wouldn't obey, and I became painfully aware of my own condition. Sharp pain radiated from my neck down my back. I feared I might have broken something. I needed help fast. Then the smell of gasoline hit me, and fear gripped me. What if the car exploded? The kids had to get out quickly. Cars passed occasionally on the main road above. Noah was stuck, I was paralyzed, and the only hope was Emily, who was now hysterical and didn't know how to unlock the car's central locking system. Ironically, that safety feature had been a major selling point when I bought the car. Could it now be our undoing? I had to get Emily to understand how to unlock the door and scramble up the embankment for help before it was too late. Time was running out. Despite the chaos around me, I focused inward and slipped into a trance-like state. I felt my soul begin to separate from my body. Usually, this out-of-body experience felt like liberation, but this time, it was a matter of life and death. I drifted toward Emily's crying form and merged with her spirit, becoming one. The sensation was unlike anything I'd felt before. Before, I had entered calm or distracted minds, but Emily was panicked and overwhelmed. Through her eyes, I saw my own broken, unconscious body. I felt her fears and anxiety wash over me and nearly lost myself in the storm of emotions. But I gathered myself and focused on sending thoughts to her. Slowly, she sensed something else inside her mind. Though confused, she caught enough of my message to reach over, pull out the ignition keys, and press the reset button, freeing the locks. Within seconds, Emily pushed the door open and began climbing the embankment. I experienced everything she felt, saw what she saw, and heard what she heard. As her fingers dug into the grass, I marveled at how vivid these sensations were, so different from my dulled senses after years of weariness. The smell of crushed grass and disturbed earth was overwhelming. Her body was light and agile, easily pulling herself over the embankment onto the road. I snapped back to reality. Noah and my own body were still trapped in the leaking car. No time to enjoy these sensations. I tried to turn Emily's attention toward oncoming traffic, but she kept staring down the embankment toward the car. I realized I was just a passenger in her body. I had to influence her thoughts, not force actions. Come on, Emily, look back to the road, you need to get help. Within seconds, she responded, though still confused. Her eyes scanned for any sign of cars. Then I heard the distant hum of an approaching vehicle. I watched the headlights draw near as Emily waved desperately. Then I faded away, watching as an elderly couple stepped out of the car, followed by two middle-aged men. I later learned it was the next morning when I finally woke to sunlight pouring into a room with white walls. I'm not sure how long it took me to remember what had happened the night before and realize where I was. It felt like an eternity, though it was probably only minutes. Can you imagine waking up only to find yourself swallowing a mouthful of what I later discovered was mushy cornflakes? Can you imagine being fully awake instantly, with no gradual easing from sleep to consciousness? It was like living my worst nightmare as my head jerked suddenly in panic. I found myself moving toward a giant version of my wife in a world that seemed enormous. I felt my light body lifted easily and my face pressed into the warmth and softness of a woman's chest. As her calming presence settled over me, I started noticing details around me and began to understand what was happening for the first time. I could only look forward, but I felt strands of sandy hair brushing my cheek as I turned my head slightly, pressed against that comforting chest. Mommy, Mommy, it was Daddy, I heard Emily's voice coming from my body. Suddenly, memories flooded back. Hush, hush, baby, Sarah's voice replied. I know you're scared, but Daddy will be okay. He has to be. It was definitely Sarah, though her voice sounded a little different than usual. I felt my small, delicate hand lift and brush against Sarah's cheek, sensing the wetness sliding down. I was shocked. It seemed to move on its own. Then it all clicked, the crash, helping Emily focus on getting help by merging with her, the car stopping, and rescue arriving. After that, everything was blank. I must have passed out. I had expected to wake back in my own body, where my life still hung, but that hadn't happened. I was still inside Emily. Panic surged. Why hadn't I returned? Was I dead? Did I no longer have a body to go back to? These thoughts overwhelmed me as my mind spiraled out of control. I felt Emily getting upset again. She must have sensed my thoughts. I forced myself to fade into the background until she calmed down. I realized my earlier thoughts must have reached her, which is why she ran to Sarah. I tried to blend into her background thoughts and succeeded, as she did relax a bit. Listening to Sarah's reassurances, I felt closer to another person than ever before, but still lonely. I wished someone would ease my fears and explain what was happening. Why couldn't I return? As if responding to my thoughts, Sarah began explaining more to Emily. You know your daddy is very ill, and is doing all he can to get better. We have to be patient. It won't be easy. He has serious injuries, and it might take time to know how long recovery will take. If I recover, I thought bleakly. I'm amazed both you and Noah escaped with so little. Your bruises and Noah's broken arm, it could have been much worse, Sarah added. Can I see Daddy? I want him to know I'm thinking of him, Emily asked, hugging her mom. I'm sure that will be okay. And he knows you love him and want him to get better, Sarah replied. More than she'll ever know, I thought, admiring how well Sarah handled it all. She was incredible. Come on, let's go, I thought, growing impatient to see my condition. I had to guard my thoughts carefully. Emily seemed to pick up on stray feelings I let slip. Well, he's not a pretty sight right now. I better check if it's okay for you to see him. Will you be all right alone for a few minutes? Sarah asked, then left the room after Emily said yes. Finally, some quiet. I took the chance to explore my strange situation, unique, though I wasn't sure. I hadn't tried moving Emily's body yet, I didn't want to scare her. Now, I thought about moving her hand a little, nothing happened. I stayed in the background, taking stock. At least I knew my body was still alive, though Sarah's careful words suggested things were bad. I knew she was trying to soften the truth for Emily, it could be much worse than she let on. I was fascinated to realize that all my senses were now coming through Emily's perspective. I noticed subtle and sometimes striking differences between her young, fresh body and my own. My vision was sharper than before, where I had been slightly nearsighted. Colors appeared different too. The greens were more vibrant, reds richer, and blues deeper. It felt magical, and I couldn't help but quietly marvel at the beauty of nature. For a few brief moments, this wonder helped me forget my situation. My thoughts were interrupted when Sarah returned, took Emily's hand, and led her down a quiet corridor toward the room where I was being cared for. As Emily neared the door, I felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Why stop here, you might wonder? I'll tell you. I was recalling exactly how I felt when, inside Emily's body, I entered that room and saw myself lying peacefully on a hospital bed, connected to fours, drips, and every imaginable tube attached to every visible part of my body. If Emily had been old enough to drink, it would have been a sobering moment for me. You know how it feels seeing a photo taken from an angle you'd never normally view yourself, or hearing a recording of your voice that sounds nothing like what you expect. That's how it felt seeing my unconscious body through Emily's eyes. I was used to seeing my prone body during out-of-body experiences, but this was different. Before, it was almost like looking in a mirror, the position hadn't changed since I left it. Now, Emily's sharp eyes, the subtly altered color spectrum, and a lower viewpoint gave me a completely changed perspective. But honestly, none of that was the real shock. What hit me was the pale, grayish skin on my face. The unblinking eyes staring back. The lifelessness of it all. It was me, Henry Michael Grant, looking, for all intents and purposes, dead. Later, I learned I was in a coma, with a broken neck and suspected paralysis. The doctors thought full recovery unlikely, and the prognosis was grim. For the first time since the crash, it truly hit me, I could have died. I felt lost and out of control, desperate to do something to make that half-dead body come alive again. Sarah needed me, Emily and Noah needed me, I had to get back into my body and set things right. I tried to slip into the trance-like state that allowed my out-of-body travels, but I couldn't. This wasn't my mind controlling this body, I couldn't make Emily's brain cooperate. The influence I did have upset her, and she felt my presence again. Like before, her cries of daddy were seen as worry over my condition, not realizing I was inside her. I backed off again to let her calm down, hoping to leave her body later, maybe when she was asleep. I'd always been rational and adaptable, one of my strengths, but this tested me to the limit. There was nothing I could do now, so I chose to be a passive passenger and, ever the optimist, I decided to use this unique chance to experience life through Emily's eyes. I hoped it would only be temporary, and things would soon return to normal. I spent the rest of the day living Emily's world and made some fascinating discoveries, some even fun. It's a mystery how easily we forget what it's like to be a child, how small you feel in a world of giants. I remember being 6, my father carrying me on his shoulders, terrified of falling that long way to the ground. I tried to imagine what it would be like to be as tall as him, seeing the world from his height. But growing up slowly, you lose that sense of wonder and adventure. I was blessed to feel that wonder again as Emily unknowingly took me back to childhood. This time, though, the wonder was doubled. I was experiencing it as a girl. The experience overwhelmed me. Despite the reason, I found myself enjoying it. The little details etched themselves in my mind, I wanted to carry them back with me. Like stepping outside into warm summer air and feeling the light breeze caress my bare legs as Sarah took us home after the visit. I'd always worn shorts in warm weather, as a man and as a child, but this was different. Emily's legs were truly bare, smooth and soft, with no hair. Wearing her dress, The breeze touched much more skin than I'd ever felt before. It was glorious. Or sitting on a rough Hessian-backed chair in the hospital, feeling the coarse fabric scratch the back of her thighs, then lifting a leg to scratch the irritation away. Things like simply walking down the road and noticing the emptiness between her legs struck me. I realized I had always been, without fully thinking about it, aware of what was between my own legs when I was in my body. I like to imagine it was because I was well endowed, but deep down I knew all men are constantly aware of their genitalia. They're always in the way, nudging and reminding you no matter what you do, in a way a woman can't truly understand. When you sit, you feel them. When you walk, they demand attention. When you see an attractive woman, they embarrassingly remind you they are there. I had never realized just how constant their presence was until now that I no longer had them. I remembered trying, back when I was a man, to sit with my legs tightly pressed together like a girl. It always looked so uncomfortable. I never managed it for long. It hurt and felt awkward. It amazed me how easily women could do this, seemingly without effort. Now I understood I was just as aware of the gap between her legs as I had been of my male organ and balls before. And honestly, I felt liberated. It felt good, at least for a while. Sitting down and feeling that flatness and smoothness between my legs was a relief. I loved the freedom from the bulk and restriction that had once clung to me. I'm sure part of what made it so enjoyable was knowing I'd soon return to my own body, that this was a one-time experience. But being honest with myself, I couldn't deny the envy I felt for the sensual life a girl must live. I wanted it to last longer. After we got home, the rest of the day passed quickly. Everything still felt fresh, new, and exciting. The only downside was seeing how my injuries and coma were affecting Sarah and the family. I missed the special intimacy I'd taken for granted with her. They were understandably struggling. The family felt incomplete. My body lay in a hospital bed for an unknown time, and Noah was there too, recovering from his broken arm. Sarah's gloom dimmed any joy I might have felt, and I was determined to get back to my own body that evening. I couldn't bear to see them suffer more than necessary. While Emily took a bath, I kept my mind busy. I didn't want to invade her privacy. I was relieved when she was finally put to bed, though I hadn't expected to find her lying in my bed next to Sarah. It made sense, they were both upset, and I was sure Sarah wanted the comfort of her daughter's company. I felt Emily drift off about 5 minutes after closing her eyes, and after hearing Sarah's steady breathing, I tried to leave her body again. I wanted to see if I could gain some control, though I felt nervous about failing. I wondered if there was a physical limit to how far I could travel. I knew the hospital was about 7 miles away, and hoped it wouldn't be a problem. Putting those thoughts aside, I tried to slip into a trance, creating the spiritual state I'd entered so many times before. Even though Emily was asleep, I could still feel her presence, and for the first time I entered her higher consciousness, hoping to gain enough control to succeed. I tried to concentrate and relax at once, willing myself toward the ceiling as I always had. I waited for the familiar feeling of lightness and floating. Nothing. Zero. I was shaken but tried again. Same result, nothing. In those few seconds, my despair was complete. I instinctively knew I'd never leave this body as I once had. Though Emily slept, it was still her body and mind in control. My influence was minimal, not nearly enough to use my natural gift. Imagine suddenly losing your sight, or becoming deaf, or unable to speak. That's how I felt. Losing the ability to leave my body was like losing a fundamental sense. On a deeper level, I realized Emily had no psychic ability at all. I sensed nothing. Maybe this ability depends on something physical she didn't have. Surprisingly, that thought came second to a harsher truth. I was trapped here, a passenger in my daughter's body. It was a long night before I finally succeeded in joining Emily in her much-needed escape. When I woke the next day, thankfully at the same time as Emily, I no longer felt eager to see life through her eyes. What had once felt like a reluctant but curious adventure now felt like imprisonment, a prisoner confined to a small cell, completely dependent on Emily for everything. I knew I had to try to leave her body again, but deep down, I also knew it was a hopeless effort. I couldn't cry on my own anymore, yet I still felt the same ache and sorrow that tears would have expressed. Was I doomed to spend the rest of my life trapped in Emily's body? And if so, how would I survive? As I had expected, every attempt I made to leave Emily's body failed. I hoped I wasn't creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, that my doubts hadn't made escape impossible, but I knew the truth. I simply didn't have enough control over Emily to meet the physical demands of the transition. For a few days, I withdrew completely, unwilling to intrude on Emily's young life or face my own situation. I spent much of that time quietly listening to her thoughts, occasionally opening my spiritual senses through her, but mostly I paid little attention. What finally pulled me out of this understandably self-indulgent mood was Emily herself. After a few days, boredom pushed me to tune in more closely to her mind. Unsurprisingly, I found her worrying about me. She was sad for me and for the family, but above all, she seemed curious, perhaps even aware of my presence, and I sensed excitement. What should I do? Should I let her know I was still here and okay? Or stay hidden, letting her grow without carrying a burden that might be unfair? It was a difficult decision, but I chose compromise. I would stay in the background for now but try to reassure her when she was asleep. Hopefully, she'd think it a dream, while I could quietly influence and encourage her when needed. I felt proud of this selfless choice, made out of love for my daughter. In truth, it wasn't hard. True love demands sacrifice. After making that decision, things felt more bearable. Even if I never returned to my body, I could still share in my family's life. It could have been far worse. I could have been dead. Life went on. Weeks became months, and I grew used to living through Emily. It became hard to tell which thoughts were mine and which were hers. Of course, that's poetic license. What I mean is that the daily reality of living through her body began to feel almost normal. I convinced myself that whatever she did was what I wanted to do, whatever she thought I wanted to think, and whatever she felt, I wanted to feel too, until it no longer mattered. Intellectually, I knew this wasn't true, but thinking about it too much would have driven me mad. This is how I accepted my lack of control over her actions, and this state lasted another 3 years until everything changed. It was fascinating to experience the joys and challenges of growing up as a young girl entering puberty. There were too many new perspectives to fully describe, but I'll highlight a few. The physical changes were the most obvious and easiest to describe, but not the only things that stood out. For example, Emily's friendship with the 2 little girls next door. Little girls. Who am I calling little girls? I was 1 now, for all intents and purposes. Their play lacked aggression and was full of simple pleasures, putting on lipstick, dressing up, and wearing Sarah's oversized shoes, strutting around feeling sophisticated and grown up. These things were new to me and immensely fun. Perhaps I adapted to this feminine existence more easily than I expected, but I no longer cared. When the physical changes hit, though, they hit hard. The most earth-shattering moment was Emily's first period. For me, it was the second time experiencing such a change, but what a difference from the relatively simple boy-to-man transition. Now I understood how much Sarah suffered during her cycles. The first signs of womanhood appeared around her chest, itching that began just after her 12th birthday. I was fascinated to see her swollen and puffy pointers during bath time. By then, I no longer tried to fade into the background during intimate moments. I felt part of her completely, no longer a voyeur or intruder. Feeling her excitement about developing chests and the joys of becoming a woman moved me beyond words. Her innocence touched me deeply, and I felt a sad awareness that this excitement wouldn't last as she matured fully. Her first period was a joyous occasion for her, celebrated with Sarah. It marked her entry into womanhood, a truly important milestone. But my sadness returned as, by the 3rd or 4th cycle, she grew weary of cramps and mood swings, soon cursing their monthly arrival. Of course, with puberty came boys, or more accurately, Emily's growing interest in them. This was harder for me to accept than her menstruation, her developing chests, which were quite noticeable by now, or any other feminine changes we'd shared. I could feel and hear her thoughts whenever she spotted a cute boy. See how naturally thinking about boys had become for her. For the first time in nearly 3 years, I began experiencing an identity crisis. I worried she might act on those thoughts, but I soon found myself enjoying the experience despite my hesitation. I clearly remember Darren, a handsome boy a bit older than Emily, trying to ask her out and her reaction. If the roles had been reversed, I might have felt excitement, but instead, I sensed new sensations. Emily's pointers hardened, and a warm feeling arose deep inside me, later becoming a sticky dampness. Strangest of all was a dizzy, light-headed sensation, like what I'd felt after a burst of pure oxygen while mountain climbing years before. Her response amazed me. She was charmingly naive, fantasizing about the romance and feeling empowered by knowing someone found her attractive and desirable. This stood in stark contrast to Darren's raw lust. Perhaps this captures the biggest difference between the genders, certainly the most vivid memory I have. Of course, she said yes, he was pretty cute. Dating added a whole new dimension to dressing up for both Emily and me. For Emily, it gave her fresh motivation. For me, knowing what was going through the other guys' minds made me feel a bit like a tethered goat. What I didn't realize then was that this vulnerability was partly self-inflicted and ultimately pleasurable for her. This time, she was dressing up for a boy, and this time, it was real. Her clothes were chosen to be subtly revealing, designed to leave the boy wanting more. Makeup highlighted the features she wanted noticed and concealed those she didn't. I knew this because I was inside her thoughts. I felt the cool evening air on Emily's legs as a light breeze played around them. The swish of her dress brushing against her nylons as she walked hand in hand with Darren. The scent of a man as Emily rested her head on Darren's shoulder at night's end. Each new sensation was fresh and precious. As Emily kissed Darren goodnight, I began to understand the attraction a girl might feel for a boy, experiencing everything through her senses. It was exhilarating. As her dates became more frequent, I looked forward to each one with growing excitement. For the next year, little changed. Emily's life was my life, and routine set in. But this cozy state wouldn't last. Soon, a new upheaval would shake us all. During this time, my family's visits to see my body, frequent at first, gradually dwindled as they came to accept that I might never wake up. No matter how much they loved me, the sight of my condition became too painful to endure. I was grateful when only Sarah kept up regular visits, though even hers became sparse. I found it unbearable myself, constantly reminded of what was lost. What I didn't know then was that I was about to get a chance to return to my own body, a chance I would have preferred to avoid. Emily was 13, and we had been regularly seeing a boy named Chandler, whom we both liked. He was tall, dark, and had irresistibly kissable lips. I enjoyed the stolen kisses and hurried touches we managed in rare moments alone. One day, while looking after Chandler's younger brother Ross, 7, everything changed. At first, things seemed simple. We sat on a bench overlooking the front garden. Chandler was drowsy from the warm afternoon sun. Ross was riding his small bike, showing off, when suddenly he lost control and sped into the road. Emily's heart stopped briefly before she jumped up and dashed across the sidewalk to grab him before any oncoming traffic could reach him. Chandler sat up, confused by what was happening. Then Emily turned just in time to see a small pickup truck speeding toward her. She barely had time to push Ross away before the vehicle struck her, tossing her into the air and landing behind the slowing truck. Then, silence. I didn't know how long we'd been unconscious, but I was disoriented, waking up unable to see. Panic hit as I remembered the truck speeding toward Emily and feared she'd died, leaving me in limbo. Then reason took hold. Although I couldn't see, I could hear a faint hum. Listening carefully, I recognized the near-silent whir of air conditioning regulating the room's temperature. It was torture. I'd never felt so helpless or alone. The isolation was magnified by the complete absence of Emily. I sensed no trace of her anywhere. Perhaps it was panic that triggered what happened next, or maybe the sudden feeling that I controlled this body, but the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes. And they were my own eyes. I looked around tentatively, or washing over me after so long of being a passenger inside another. I realized I was moving my own eyeballs. The room looked like the hospital room my original body had occupied. Had the shock of Emily's accident somehow pushed me back into myself? My eyes caught movement at the edge of my vision. Amazingly, I managed to turn my head slightly, groaning from the unexpected effort. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I recognized the voice. Sarah hurried toward me, breaking my thoughts. "Oh, darling," she sobbed, overwhelmed with emotion, "you've come back to me." She wrapped her arms tightly around me. In that moment, revelation struck as my psychic senses flooded back, overwhelming me. This alone told me everything I needed to know, aside from the physical sensations. Time seemed to freeze as I felt her body pressed close to my chest, and I realized I was still inside Emily's body. The question was, where was Emily? I couldn't sense her anywhere. Despair washed over me as darkness claimed me again. The next time I awoke, my vision returned instantly. I tried moving my arm and felt it obey. I slipped into the dreamlike state I'd always reached in my own body, rising toward the ceiling. Rotating 180 degrees, I looked down to see the battered, bruised form of my daughter. If I'd been physical, my mental cry of anguish might have woken the dead. Having control of her body, along with the ability to leave it, told me Emily was gone. I could feel her nowhere. A profound sadness overwhelmed me as I realized she was dead. I didn't want to return to her body yet. I needed time to process my emotions. I drifted beyond the room into the corridor, watching doctors and nurses hurry purposefully to their tasks. Then, knowing where I was headed, I found myself in a room like Emily's, looking down at my original body, pale and lifeless. I wondered what would happen if I tried to inhabit my own body again after so long away. Would it recognize me and accept my spirit? I was ready to try, knowing Sarah would be relieved to see me alive again, but first, I had to say goodbye to Emily, just once more. I returned to her room, marveling at the familiar sense of freedom I'd regained. But my joy was tempered by loss. I found myself beside her lifeless form, expecting quiet, but startled to see Sarah holding Emily's cold hand. "Oh, come on, baby," she sobbed. "Please come back to your mom. I know you woke briefly yesterday. I heard you groan and saw your eyes flicker, but the doctors think I'm a hysterical woman desperate for hope. Please, baby, come back." Tears streamed down her face. It pained me deeply to see my wife and my beloved mother figure suffer like this. I tried to send calming thoughts her way, but her anguish was too great. I realized then that I faced the hardest decision of my life. But before I could decide, I had to understand who I truly was now. Yes, I am Henry Grant, husband to Sarah and father to Noah and Emily, but it was no longer that simple. I had lived as my daughter's partner for so long, sharing her thoughts, joys, and struggles. I'd experienced firsthand the emotional turmoil puberty brought her. I'd even felt attraction to boys through her eyes. What would becoming my middle-aged male self again do to me? Digging deeper, I found I felt just as much a young girl as I did a man. Living in Emily's body, mind, and dreams had made me part of her. I was comfortable existing on either level. I knew where this was headed. I just had to convince myself mentally that returning to my own body was the right choice. Once made, there'd be no turning back. It wouldn't be fair to anyone. Looking again at Sarah's strained face, I ended my hesitation. I had to act. Who needed me most? That would decide the sacrifice I had to make. The choice was clear. Sarah had accepted Henry Grant's death. It had been hard, but she'd moved forward, committed to raising her children as best she could. Losing Emily now would break her completely. She might never recover. Resolved, I gazed at Emily's peaceful face and drifted back to bond with her one last time. Well, not the last time. I knew I'd leave her again, enjoying brief escapes from her earthbound state. But this would always be my home. I would be Emily Grant forever. Seconds later, I felt my eyes flutter open, meeting Sarah's face as she immediately noticed. She pressed close to me,
and in that deeply emotional moment, I fully let go of Henry and became Emily, in body and soul, immersed in the boundless love Sarah had for her daughter. Despite that love, or perhaps because of it, tears streamed down my face, for Emily and for myself, relieved to have made my decision, even though it was born from tragedy. Still, nerves gnawed at me. I knew I'd have to take charge of Emily's body for every little thing. Until now, I had been a passive partner in this unique bond, and I hoped I could manage. But first, I wanted Sarah to let go of my birth body. My final selfless act would be to free her from her burden and sense of duty, just as I had been freed. Sarah pulled back slightly and cupped my chin, studying my face intently. "Oh, baby, I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, tracing every inch of me, convincing herself Emily had truly returned. I knew this would be my first real test, though I could blame any inconsistencies on the accident. I decided to take the plunge. Now was the time to reach Sarah, or, really, to start seeing her as Mom. Mommy, I croaked, accepting the glass of water she offered. "I've been talking to Daddy," I added, the first time I addressed my original self this way. Emily had said it before, but this was new for me. I was scared. I thought I was dying, but Daddy came back to me and told me he was okay. He said he was with Grandpap again, and one day, we'd all be together, but not now. He told me I had to come back to you and Noah. Seeing Sarah's strained, broken expression filled me with guilt, though I knew I was doing the right thing. My little heart ached with her pain. Steeling myself, I pressed on, tying up the loose ends. "Daddy said you have to let him go now. He can't come back to his old life and doesn't want you to worry anymore," I said, knowing it was partly true. "He just wants to rest in peace until we're all together again." I'd done what needed to be done. Now, I hoped I could comfort her and help her look toward a future, someday. It wasn't until 2 days later that I truly knew I had made the right choice. That's when Mom told me that Daddy's life support had been turned off, and now his body would decide whether to live or die. I noticed that I had started to think of my former self as Daddy. Years of living inside Emily and hearing her thoughts had shaped me more than I'd realized. I also found it surprisingly easy to pass as her. It felt natural, and I truly began to see myself as my daughter. Even though I accepted my new reality, I struggled deeply with Emily's death. Some comfort came from my returning psychic abilities. I'd had occasional visits from departed souls and helped them when I could. But none compared to the visit I longed for most, Emily's. I needed to be freed from the guilt of choosing to continue her life. 6 days later, my original body died. The burial was the catharsis my family needed. Attending my own funeral was strange and sad, but it finally closed a chapter for us. The saying "life goes on" had never felt truer as our lives gradually returned to what would become normal. It's been 18 years since that day, and I never spoke of what happened until now. After this, I will never mention it again. At first, I was nervous about how I'd adapt and how I'd manage growing up as a girl without Emily's guidance. Soon, though, I found an unexpected mentor. I decided to research gender and gender identity, thinking that understanding others' experiences might help me understand my own. After all, if anyone should feel trapped in the wrong body, it was me. I hoped learning how others coped would prepare me for any challenges ahead. I started at local and school libraries but found the available books dry and clinical, mostly in medical sections. Then I had a breakthrough. Mom had given me a PC for schoolwork, and one of the first things I did was go online. A quick search revealed a wealth of resources discussing gender from medical and emotional perspectives. I was drawn to the emotional stories, real people sharing their struggles and triumphs. It was enlightening but didn't quite explain my situation, leaving me with more questions than answers. Everything changed when I stumbled, by chance, on a site called Fiction Mania. Although it focused on TG fiction and made no claims beyond that, it offered incredible insight into the dreams and fantasies of authors and readers alike, embracing them without shame or regret. Not all the stories were enjoyable. Tales of cruelty and abuse chilled me. But the sheer variety and volume of stories made me realize that what I had was something many would long for and sacrifice greatly to possess. For the first time, I realized I shouldn't just mourn my fate, I should embrace it. Many would call this a gift. I've lived an incredibly rich life since, growing from a teenager into a woman. I experienced all the natural excitement and enthusiasm of youth, without the cynicism I'd half expected after living life once before. I discovered the profound differences between genders' outlooks on life more than I could have imagined as Henry Grant. The possibility of motherhood colors a girl's life in subtle ways beyond a man's understanding. I found myself dreaming of marriage and family, tapping into Emily's maternal instincts. The idea of a full-time career didn't excite me, but I didn't want to be confined to the home either. I found creative fulfillment in the arts, something I never achieved as Henry, and became moderately successful around Manhattan Beach. I intend to keep building this identity as I raise you both. Not everything went as expected. Though I said I'd be Emily Grant forever, I underwent another transformation, this time in name only. I'm now proud to be Emily Roberts, married to your father Marco, whom his friends call Tony. He's a kind, loving man, and I know you'll enjoy growing up with him as your dad. Looking at you now, a warm glow spreads through me. I still can't believe you both came from my very own body. Now you know everything about me, my little twins. You'll understand why I named you Henry, after my dear father, and why you're called Mary, after your great-grandmother who lost her only son. I've been talking a long time, and you look tired. I think I've said enough for now, so I'll wrap up this story before your father, grandma, and great-grandma arrive. They should be here any minute. Otherwise, you'll be too exhausted to enjoy their visit. It's funny, really, lying here in this same hospital that has played such a major role in my life, from my death, to rebirth, to becoming a mother myself. It feels as if it was all meant to be. Just then, the door to my private room opened, and Tony greeted me with a warm kiss, pulling my face close. "Oh, honey, you look absolutely beautiful, positively radiant. You know what? I think motherhood suits you." I looked up at him with a playful sparkle in my eye and gently patted the front of his trousers, feeling the source of our shared joy. "Well, don't get any big ideas. You'll have to keep this under wraps for a while. You have no idea what we women go through to look this radiant," I said, with feeling. That was something I spoke with complete conviction, having been both mother and father in my life. Men really have no idea how easy they have it sometimes. As I handed over his daughter to him, I held little Henry close for a moment and looked deep into his eyes. You know what? There was something familiar there. I could swear I saw Emily looking back at me, just for a fleeting second. At that moment, his mom and great-grandma walked in. Everything felt whole again, and I squeezed Tony's hand. "Well, I think you're going to make a wonderful mother to these children," he said, returning the squeeze. "You know what, Tony? I think you might just be right. Don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content,